My grandfather, my mother's father, was a rancher, and like all ranchers, he would get up early no matter the day of the week. My mother would tell us that when she was young, as soon as she would hear Grandpa's steps down the hall, no matter how early it was, she would immediately jump out of bed. My mother told us that she would be very embarrassed if Grandpa were to see her asleep when he had already started the day. Grandpa was always a loving father, and even though my mother knew that he would not get mad if she was not up as early as he was, she just could not stay in bed. The love and respect to her father moved her to be diligent. In today's Gospel, we hear the famous parable of the talents. We hear how the master entrusted 3 of his servants with certain amounts of money. At his return, 2 of them returned the money with profit, but the third returned the same amount that had been entrusted to him. And by his own confession, he did so because he was afraid of his master. This passage can be interpreted in several ways, but today, I want us to look at it from an angle that, even though it is not the most common one, is the one to which today's reading leads us more directly. Today, we will talk about the fear of God. We all have heard the phrase, fear of God, and at some point have been confused about its meaning. At first glance, it seems absurd. How can we think that fearing God is a virtue when what we want is to love Him? They seem to be opposite concepts. The problem is confusion of meanings. For the Christian, to fear God does not mean to be afraid of Him, but to admire and respect Him. It is similar to the attitude of a child with his father, for whom he has a mix of love, devotion, and admiration. A child loves his father, and because of that, he wants his joy. A servant is afraid of his master, and because of that, he avoids his anger. Saint Basil tells us that there are 3 ways through which we look to please God. We can look to please Him because we're afraid of punishment, and that puts us in the condition of slaves. We can look to please Him in search of a payment for obeying His command, and that puts us in the condition of mercenaries. Or we can look to please Him for the good itself, and that puts us in the condition of children. In today's Gospel, when rebuking the servant who hid the talent that was entrusted to him, the master calls him wicked, lazy servant. These are actually very meaningful words, since the opposite to laziness is diligence. And the word diligence comes from the Latin diligere, which means to love. Love is never lazy. Love moves us to action. Love moves us outside of our own selves and towards the other. Love is always ready to care and to serve. To fear God is to love God. It is to strive to serve Him and to act in accord to His word, not out of fright, but out of the love and respect towards a Father. This is why, in the first reading, we hear that the one who fears the Lord is to be praised. This is why, in the Psalm, we sing that the one who fears the Lord is to be blessed. I pray that we all search to know God, and that knowing Him we discover not the stern master from whose anger and punishment we escape, but the understanding Father for whose joy and love we strive. I pray that when we hear His voice, we hear in it not a master, but a Father. Not an order, but an opportunity. Not a reprimand, but a message of love.